Zakah following his every examples. Ladies and gentlemen, to make our lecture today more blessed, let's start this session by saying Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your enthusiasm on this 5th day of our program. Hopefully, all of you can keep your spirits up until the last day. Please let me introduce myself. My name is Ahmad Amrullah, and today I will be your master of ceremony, and I will guide you during all sessions today. Please be kind upon of me if I may have made many mistakes, since this is the first time for me to become a master of ceremonies in an international event. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our first lecture for today's agenda has already been here. Please welcome Madam Yasmina Francke. Assalamualaikum, Madam Yasmina.
Waalaikumsalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you today, Madam?
Very well, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Excuse me, Madam. May I ask you which one is correct for the pronunciation of your name? Is it Yasmina Francke or Yasmina Francke or anything else?
Yasmina Francke.
Yasmina Francke. Okay. Thank you, Madam, for your kind correction. So, ladies and gentlemen, for this session, Madam Yasmina Francke will share with us about Zakah and Awqaf experiences in Muslim minority countries. Madam Yasmina is a CEO at South African National Zakah Fund, or SANZAF. We are very honored to have you with us today, Madam. SANZAF itself is a registered national welfare institution established in 1974 and the single largest Zakah institution of its kind in South Africa. SANZAF empowers local communities through poverty alleviation, education, skill development, and disaster relief. Before we continue, Madam Yasmina, please allow me to ask, would you rather have a Q&A session during the presentation so that all participants can ask questions in the middle of your presentation, or would you rather have Q&A session at the end of after you finish your presentation, Madam?
I think my preference is to for the students to allow me to go through the presentation and to note any questions that they may have, and we can do the Q&A at the end.
Okay, thank you, Madam. As Madam Yasmina has said, all participants will be given the opportunity to ask questions after she has finished her presentation. To anyone who wants to ask some questions, you can leave your question via the chat room, or you can use the raise hand feature on your screen. And then our host will allow you to ask to the lecturer directly. It can be questions related to what she will deliver today, or questions related to her area of expertise. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's begin our first lecture. To Madam Yasmina, the time and screens is yours.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all the participants. I also want to take this opportunity to thank BAZNAS for this opportunity to present at this winter school. It is indeed an honor for us. We are but a small organization in relation to the size of BAZNAS, and I'm always honored to be part of the platforms that BAZNAS offer, in having shared in some of the webinars that has happened during earlier parts of the COVID lockdown. So it is certainly an opportunity for us to share with you the South African National Zakah Fund's experiences and what we as a smaller organization are experiencing, specifically in respect of Zakah collection and distribution. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share my screen so that you can follow my slides. I have prepared a few slides just to direct and channel the conversation. So It is now 11 a.m. or just past 11 a.m. In South Africa, and it's a Friday morning, and for many of you, it is Friday afternoon. So I know the attention span might be competing with what we normally feel at the end of a week as we face the weekend. So I hope you will bear with me. I thought I would start off just with a little bit of a background, just to provide you maybe a bit of context with our SANZAF's relationship with BAZNAS. Just to give you some context, so SANZAF is a member of the World Zakah Forum, and that's part of our stakeholder engagement strategy. But importantly also, because we are a small organization operating in a Muslim minority country, it is important for us to take lessons from those who are perhaps more, I think, fortunate to have more resources and be able to do a lot of what BAZNAS is doing in terms of research and development as well. So through the World Zakah Forum, we've been able to forge relationships with the top structure of BAZNAS. And we were very honored when last year, almost a year ago, on the 16th of September, when BAZNAS came to Cape Town in South Africa to accept 2 awards, which was the 2019 Humanitarian Award and also the Best Zakah Distribution Platform Award from the Global Islamic Finance Awards, and that was held in South Africa. So we were quite pleased to be able to have the BAZNAS representations there. And then our Johannesburg, our Pretoria team was able to also host the BAZNAS team and accompany them to the Indonesian consulate in Pretoria. But what I also wanting to just share with you, just as a context, is South Africa's relationship with Indonesia. So I put together just a few images, as you can see there. The first image there is a picture of Sheikh Yusuf. Now, Sheikh Yusuf has been credited for bringing Islam to South Africa. Now, Sheikh Yusuf was born in Celebes in the year 1626. Now, Celebes is now known as Sulawesi. And in the 1690s, when the Dutch was occupying Indonesia, he resisted that occupation, and then he was exiled to South Africa and Cape Town particularly. That was called the Cape of Good Hope, which at the time was also being colonized by the Dutch. So they exiled Sheikh Yusuf from the East Indies, and he arrived in Cape Town on the 2nd of April, 1694. And that essentially was probably the start of Islam in South Africa. At that time, there were many slaves in South Africa. And so to separate Sheikh Yusuf, because they were worried of his influence because he was well educated, he was also a son of Makassar's nobility. In fact, he was the nephew of King Bisu of Goa. In any case, they put him in a farm which is outside of Cape Town called Zandvallei Farm, and he started a Muslim community there, and that area is now called Makassar in Cape Town. So we have an area in Cape Town, just outside of Cape Town, called Makassar. And what you see there is a picture of his karamat, a dome that was built in honor of him. His remains was eventually taken to Indonesia, where he was buried. But that essentially is our connection with Indonesia. And when we talk about anything related to Islam and our deen, we cannot do that without acknowledging that connection with Indonesia. I also put in here a picture of a masjid. Now that is called the Awal Masjid. It is the oldest masjid in South Africa, which is also in Cape Town, which is where I reside. And this masjid was the work of Tuan Guru, which was Imam Abdullah Qadi Abdul Salam. He was born in Tidore Island in Indonesia in 1712. And he was also exiled to South Africa because of his resistance to the colonization by the Dutch. And he lived in a warehouse, and in 1797, he was allowed to convert his warehouse into a masjid. And that is the first masjid in South Africa, in Cape Town, and it is still honored and it's still standing as you see there. So that's just a little bit of introduction, because we will be talking about Islam and the Muslim minority in South Africa, and the practices around Zakah and Awqaf in South Africa. So I thought I'd just put that out there as a little bit of an introduction to our relationship with BAZNAS, and then also our relationship with Indonesia. Coming back to the topic for today, so Zakah and Awqaf experience in Muslim minority countries. Just in terms of the structure, what I'll be talking through is just looking a little bit at what is called Muslim minority countries. And we have to look at that in the context of poverty in the Muslim world. And then look at Zakah and Awqaf in addressing poverty. I want to then take to a South African case study, and in particularly the SANZAF Zakah management model. So when you go to source information on poverty in the world, it isn't an exact science. We have to understand that this is a fluid thing. It changes all the time. But let's just take a dipstick. In 2018, the World Bank put out this picture as you see there. And you can see in terms of where it is believed people live in extreme poverty is mostly on the African continent. You also see parts of India and the Far East. But primarily you would see extreme poverty being polarized towards the African continent. Also, when you speak to the United Nations, and particularly when they started putting out a lot of information regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, which I believe you have already covered in the past 4 days, their statistics, and at that time they were talking about poverty less than $1.25 US a day, but we know that that is now being pegged against 1.9 US dollars a day. But essentially more than 1 billion people live in extreme poverty today, and you can understand that the African continent does take a greater share of that 1 billion. And 3 years ago, more than 750 million people went to bed hungry every night. And we can understand that that number has changed given what the world has been through the past 6 to 8 months with the COVID pandemic, with every country speaking about the economic impact of lockdowns. But we see that there are so many millions of children, hundreds of millions of children and youth out of school. And that includes 61 million of which are of primary school age. And the importance of this is to start looking at what is being done about it, and why that is the case, because mostly due to a lack of funding. We also see 49 countries have no laws specifically protecting women from domestic violence, and 1.8 billion people in the world exposed to drinking water that was contaminated. And also the number of people living in slums and shanty towns is estimated at 862 million, and that number is growing. And the statistics I'm putting up on here is to give you a sense of how the Sustainable Development Goals have then been established, because it addresses to some extent many of these issues, which is around poverty, which is around education, which is about sanitation and all of those things, and about women and gender equality. But when we look now at a map that speaks to Muslim minority countries, and also this is also not an exact science, because I think the minute you put this picture up, you must know that it has changed, because it is a fluid thing. But essentially, there is a sense of a slight overlap if you look again to the African continent, where you earlier saw the highest level of poverty, there is a correlation there with Muslim minorities. So if you look to Central and Sub-Saharan Africa, you will see that there are a less amount of Muslims, but there are also a high prevalence of poverty in the world. Just to take some insights from that data in respect of Muslims in the world, the data says that there are currently 1.8, and I probably think it's closer to 1.9 billion Muslims in the world today, and that is of a population of, call it 7.8, if we round it. So 25% of the world are Muslim. But you also hear many people say that while we constitute about 25% of the world's population, we share in 50% of global poverty. Also, when we look at how the Muslim countries account for the total Muslim population, a study showed 226 countries and the Muslim population of those 226 countries, the top 10 of those shows 20% of the Muslims in the world. So in Mauritania, Tunisia, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iran, Western Sahara, Turkey, Yemen, Algeria, and Morocco. Those shows also high numbers of Muslims in those countries. But it also shows us that there's 26 countries where there are no Muslims, so we need to maybe even question the data. Coming to Indonesia, Indonesia constitutes 12.7% of the Muslim population in the world. And by contrast, the South African population of Muslims is currently sitting at, or the research says 2% of the population. We believe it's probably more like 4%, but the last time South Africa did a census was in 2010, and we are about to go into a census now. So we feel that the Muslim population in our country is slightly higher than what the research is showing, alhamdulillah, and it is growing. And that is also due to the opening up of our borders. If you all know the history of South Africa, you know we were an apartheid state for many years, and our borders were closed to other African countries. And as that apartheid was abolished, our borders are opening, and we're starting to see many more Muslims coming into our country from our neighboring states and from African states on our continent, where if you look to the North Africa, there is a higher percentage of Muslims living there. So I'd like to now talk about the Muslim minorities and particularly what are the dynamics of Muslims in countries where Islam is not the dominant religion. And so when it comes to the ability to practice your religion, to practice Islam in a country where it is not dominant, we are protected by the International Bill of Rights, because the International Bill of Rights says that there is freedom of belief and religion. So in many countries, that recognition of the International Bill of Rights allows Muslim minorities the rights and the privileges, and also the right to organize and manage our own community affairs, and then establish Islamic socioeconomic and even political systems. So when we talk about Islamic socioeconomic systems, we're starting to talk about a system that allows us to collect and distribute zakah and all forms of charitable giving, including Awqaf. So historically, also in South Africa has been our experience that Muslims organizations begin as informal gatherings and then informal networks that's been established to serve the needs of their fellow Muslims, and then develop later on into more formal organizations with a little bit more stability, and where you also start seeing vertical and horizontal giving structures. So I will describe the vertical and horizontal a little bit more in my following slide. And then we started seeing in the 90s and the 1990s and the year 2000s, where Muslims in Muslim minority countries particularly, obviously then started to formalize their status as professional non-government units with various aims and objectives. And that means they started to work within the ambit of the law of their particular country. So particularly if you're looking to 1974, when SANZAF was established, we then as an organization needed to establish ourselves within the ambit of the law of our country, and we could only do that as an NPO. Now, an NPO in South Africa is an equivalent to an NGO in other countries. We just have a different terminology. And that is probably the process for many other Muslim organizations in Muslim minority countries. What we also see what Muslim NGOs are doing is actively promoting a better understanding of Islam and to fight the negative discrimination that we are confronted with regularly because you are a minority in an otherwise non-Muslim country. So if we go to just get to what I described earlier, which was the vertical and the horizontal giving. So vertical giving, as you all probably know, refers to the resources that's mobilized by one community for another community. So it refers to external mobilization of resources. And that's probably seen best when you talk about an international aid system. So vertical giving is when you're not collecting funds for the community within the community. The funds are coming from outside. So often this happens as the international community become more aware of a particular plight. So if you were to look currently at what's happening in Syria or even Lebanon and Palestine, a lot of the resources are mobilized outside of those countries. And that's kind of what we call vertical giving. And you might find in Muslim minority countries that vertical giving is an important dynamic to be able to get those Muslim organizations to get started and to find stability and to establish themselves. And once that happens, you start seeing more of the horizontal giving happening. Now, horizontal giving is the internal mobilization of resources, which is about self-help and mutual assistance. It is then mobilizing resources from your own community for your own use. So the Muslims within the Muslim minority groups then mobilizing funds within their own community for their particular needs. And in South Africa, there's a concept called Ubuntu, and that is a sense of horizontal giving. And we often find many arguments that speaks to the benefits of horizontal giving because it talks to ownership of the problem, because we understand the problem and because we're doing something about it ourselves as opposed to taking a handout perhaps. We'd probably be more determined to make sure that we find the solution and work towards it being quite impactful. What we have seen in the last decade, with many private foundations, trust, even corporate foundation, huge family trusts as well being established. We've seen a lot of vertical giving happening. And if I could maybe mention one, if you look at the Bill Gates Foundation, not in South Africa, established in South Africa, but definitely there are organizations that benefit from that. So that would be a form of vertical giving. Also, what we find is horizontal giving is about sharing resources amongst ourselves. So it's about mutual support, but it's also about investing to improve the conditions for ourselves. And that has been our situation and our experience in South Africa, with particularly establishing a Zakah institution in a Muslim minority country and getting involved in Awqaf projects, because it is about sharing our resources amongst ourselves and working towards improving our own situation. Because we often find government resources are not sufficient. And if you start organizing for yourself within a structure, because you have a divine system such as Zakah and Awqaf, then it can work to your benefit if everybody understands how the system works. So I want to now talk a little bit about the concept of giving in Muslim minority countries. We know that the act of giving amongst Muslims throughout the world is a principle of our deen. It is about caring for the other, and it is a basic article of our faith. And this kind of morally and religiously inspired action underlies the provision of providing for the poor, where we find that states often cannot efficiently provide. And that also includes not just consumptive, addressing consumptive needs, but also development needs, and also things like basic healthcare and education. So if you look at the map I put up earlier, and you look at the poverty levels, and you look at African states, you will find that those countries in themselves economically are also very poor. So in the sense of their ability to collect revenue from themselves is quite limited, and therefore necessary structures like basic healthcare and education is also lacking. But within those structures that we can create and establish ourselves, and if we understand how to apply the principles of Zakah and Waqaf, how we can then find ways to improve and serve the needs of our own community. So charitable organizations has kind of emerged as Muslim NGOs, and it has over time not just addressed immediate needs, but it has started to focus on a wider range of services. So what we see today, even though it was established as purely from a deen point of view, it now looks at medical services, educational services, even family welfare. So you get social welfare attached to a Muslim NGO, but also emergency assistance in the time of a disaster. And we've seen that now with the COVID-19 pandemic. So today we can see that the system is being recognized by even the Western world. There is a significant amount of interest by development professionals studying development studies, but even Western academics in trying to understand the principle of Zakah, but also an interest into leveraging Zakah towards addressing the plight of the world. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and how Zakah is being earmarked as some funds to augment government's efforts in every country to address the Sustainable Development Goals. In South Africa, I want to just talk a little bit about how the dynamics of giving plays off in the South African context. Alhamdulillah, Muslims in South Africa, although a minority, we have succeeded in many ways in preserving the institution, in keeping with the prescribed principles of Islam and our values to benefit our community, albeit that we operate in a non-Muslim environment. And also what we have seen that giving, particularly Zakah, Sadaqah, Lillah, although motivated firstly, of course, as an act of ibadah, we've also seen that some of the underlying motivation is also driven by giving towards a particular cause. And like many motivations around the world, it comes down to an individual preference. So if an organization in South Africa is driving a particular cause and the individual wants to pay their zakah, they will more than likely channel their zakah with the organization that is driving a particular cause that finds resonance with that muzaki. So there is very much also a rational approach in identifying causes that's worthy of support. And those causes are the ones that are needed in that particular country. So in South Africa, definitely education is a key area where funding is needed. So we find that a lot of our support comes from those who feel that they can relate to the benefits of investing in educating the youth. So we've seen many community organizations mushroom over the years, and there's a fair amount of giving also happening via to needy families through institutions. So we find that organizations such as ourselves and many other Zakah collection agencies are growing, alhamdulillah. But a key factor in that growth are issues around governance, because that impacts trust. So as an organization operating in South Africa, we see that there are others also mushrooming and also starting to operate in the same space as we are. And the important factor for the Muzaki then is, who do I channel my Zakat to? Because remember, this is not set up by government. It is not we are not appointed by government. So there are no directive from government, and there are no laws or regulations that governs the payment of zakah in Muslim minority countries. So it is very much a choice by the Muzaki. And so those NGOs, and that's the structure that we have to operate to, have to prove that they are worthy of doing the correct distribution to be able to justify accepting zakah from the Muzaki. But the issue around quantifying the extent of giving of Muslims continues to be something difficult to report on, because there's unfortunately no formal record keeping. Because we do not report to government necessarily about our funds, we do report to the Department of Social Development in issuing financial statements, but we do not necessarily do formal reporting on our collections. So it's difficult. Often we get a question on, so how much zakah is there in South Africa? Or even if we talk broader than South Africa, we talk to Sub-Sahara South Africa and many of the Muslim minority countries. It is difficult to estimate. We've done a bit of an estimation for ourselves in South Africa, because we are a little bit closer to other organizations and we understand a little bit more about our environment, but it's not verified. It is a guesstimate, although we believe an informed guesstimate, and I'll talk to that a little bit when I get to particularly the South African scenario. So when we talk about the two particular topics for this session, we talk about Zakah and Awqaf. And I'm going to make the assumption that many of you have a very good understanding of the two concepts. But just for completeness, we know that Zakah implies growth and purification, and that it is an annual obligation on every Muslim if they hold the nisab and they've passed the whole. And there are those conditions that there are for the payment of Zakah, as I mentioned there. And in terms of ownership as well. But there's also various conditions for the distribution of zakah. We know Surah Tawbah, verse 60, where those 8 categories are quite clear for us, but it is essentially an act of ibadah. We also know the Quran speaks to many ayah in the Quran and many hadith that references zakah and the importance of paying zakah. But the one that stands out for me is that in the Quran, in Surah 9, verse 103, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Khudh min amwal," take of their zakah, so that you might purify and sanctify them. It talks to two things. It doesn't say ask, it talks to, it's an obligation, and it talks to the purification and the sanctification. So there's the benefit of paying the zakah. We talk to Awqaf. That has a different meaning. It is about containing and preserving. It is different to zakah because whereas zakah is an obligation, an annual obligation, if those certain conditions are met, but Awqaf is voluntary. Is a regulation for the endower and for the beneficiary, but importantly, it is sadaqatul jariyah. There is perpetual reward. And in Sahih Muslim, it is narrated that the action of a man stops when he dies, except for three things: continuous charity, which is sadaqatul jariyah; knowledge that he shares with teachers, or a pious child who prays for him. So we see the importance of sadaqatul jariyah, that will continue to benefit you even after death. So those two important Islamic social finance tools, if one could term them that, is very important enablers in terms of fighting poverty around the world. So at the 7th Annual World Zakah Forum in Malacca on Islamic finance, that was in 2018, the narrative centered around Islamic social finance being absolutely the key to alleviating poverty and hunger. There is no contention around this issue. Everybody agrees that the role of zakah and awqaf, amongst other Islamic social finance tools, are key to alleviating poverty and hunger. Also, it was concluded that Islamic social finance tools can effectively support the Sustainable Development Goals. And Sheikh Irfan had a session on that, I think it was Wednesday, where he spoke about the ability to do that. And particularly if it's properly developed, managed, and utilized with transparency, accountability, and efficiency. And so we talk about the good governance around zakah and awqaf. What we've also seen, and this is also what Dr. Irfan alluded to, is that at these symposiums, we look at the estimate of zakah around the world, that there is an estimation from about 200 billion to 1 trillion across the world. And just in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries, there's 187 million US dollars per year. And I think that for the Western world is enticed by this because it is an annual obligation. It is not a once-off, it is an annual obligation. So that kind of funding happens on a yearly basis. It is but a portion of the individual's wealth. We have also seen that Muslim states, as well as Muslim NGOs, also we are looking at mobilizing zakah for poverty alleviation, but we are looking at it in a structured way, in that we don't only look at the consumptive needs, but we are definitely looking at the developmental needs, so that we follow that old adage where you say, give a man a fish and you feed him for the day. If you teach him to fish, then you feed him for a lifetime. And I think that is about mobilizing zakah in a more structured and organized way. And many of these Muslim NGOs who initially was established purely for a welfare relief are starting to see, as they become more sustainable as organizations, the benefit for looking at more structured long-term projects for sustainable relief. I now want to just take you through a few slides on the South African case study, and particularly just the scenario within South Africa, so you can see where the South African National Zakah Fund fits in, because this is our context. We operate in this environment. South Africa is a country that faces triple threat, and that triple threat, we always talk about unemployment, inequality, and poverty. And when we talk about unemployment, currently, or sorry, maybe not currently, but prior to the COVID-19, 30% of our population was unemployed. So 1 in every 3 people do not have a job. We know that that number has increased since COVID. The extent of that as an absolute figure, an absolute number, has not been reported on yet, but South Africa is going to go through a second another census. So we'll probably start seeing more data, more accurate data coming out. But even 30% of the population being unemployed is a huge sector of our economy. And of that 30%, most of them receive a government grant. Now, the government grant means that they do get some kind of funding on a monthly basis. But when we see people and we try and assist, we know that that funding is not sufficient to address all the needs that that family might require. When we talk to inequality in South Africa, the top 10% of South Africa earns 55% of the total national income. So that's when we talk about inequality. Those of you who understand the economics and you know about the Gini coefficient, when you look at the Gini coefficient, which measures the inequality in a country from those who are earns the highest and those who earns practically nothing, and measures the gap between that, South Africa is the highest, the gap between the poorest of the poor and the rich. So South Africa, when you look at the list of countries and where the Gini coefficient is measured, South Africa has the highest gap in terms of inequality. So that's not something we're proud of, but it is a reality. And much of that is related to our history of apartheid. But inshallah, we're working hard ourselves as an NGO. And if I speak to all of those in the social sector, we're working hard to try and address this issue. So I'd like to talk a bit about the NGOs that are working hard to address those triple threats. So there are more than 120,000 registered, and we call it NPOs. I do refer to them as NGOs because it's the more commonly accepted term in the world. But in South Africa, we talk about non-profit organization as opposed to non-government organizations. And we have a strict process for registering yourself or the entity as an NPO in South Africa, and that's important. There's a proper process to register where you must have a trust deed, you must have a certificate of incorporation, you must have a memorandum of articles of association, you must fill in a set of application forms, and that gets submitted to our Department of Social Development. And once you get the approval to be a non-profit organization, it is not a status that you then keep for eternity. You have to comply with certain regulations to be able to maintain that status. So that for us is a good thing because it does talk to NPOs being responsible. So out of that 120,000 registered NPOs in South Africa, approximately 120 to 150 are Muslim NPOs or NGOs. And that I want to exclude from that number many of the masajid, because they also register themselves as trusts, and then they have to have an NPO number to be able to collect funds. But I'm excluding them from that because every masajid in South Africa is also registered. So, but those who operate purely as an institution, just to collect zakah and distribute zakah, we are about 120 to 150. What I've listed here is the top 5, the top 6 operating in South Africa, and collectively we collect about 500 to 700 million rands in South Africa on an annual basis of zakah. So I don't know how much that translates into Indonesian rupiah, but it probably translates to about $45 million on an annual basis. However, the potential is greater. Whilst we're only collecting 700 million, we believe that there is potentially between 1.5 to 2 billion rands worth of wealth in South Africa that we are not collecting. So there could be two dynamics. One dynamic is that those individuals choose to channel their own zakah personally and not channel it via an institution. Or secondly, that there needs to be more education around zakah. So there is the proper calculation of the zakah, and that it is done correctly so that they fulfill that obligation. And that number we've established because we have in South Africa many Islamic banks, which is alhamdulillah been allowed to be established within the ambit of the law in our country, being a non-Muslim country, but we have Muslim banks. And we have investment houses that are Sharia compliant. So when we look at this discretionary saving that sits with the Sharia compliant investment houses, and we look at the savings that sit with the Islamic banks, we can see 2.5% of that should take us closer to 2 billion. And so there is the potential for us to collect more zakah. And we, as agencies for collecting zakah, continuously to do our best to try and do that. When it comes to Awqaf, each one of those organizations manages Waqaf projects, but we only have one call it structured Awqaf service provider, which is called Awqaf South Africa. They were established in the year 2000, and what they do is they invest the endowment funds that they collect, and they spend only the income generated from the investment to fund community development projects. So whereas many of the other zakah collection agencies would run a Sadaqatul Jariyah project where we would maybe do a tree planting waqaf or a masjid waqaf or a hospital waqaf, and we would collect funds and we would build that structure. Awqaf has a different model where they do more of the investment and the capital stays, and only the return on capital is used to fund community projects. And many of these organizations work alongside Awqaf SA because there is a lot of collaboration needed within our country. If we look at the South African National Zakah Fund model itself, I'd just like to take you through how we as SANZAF operate. So the main structures that we look to is our zakah collection element, then our zakah distribution element, and then obviously our zakah administration and the management of the entity. So to the left, you will see all of those activities that we are engaged in that speaks to zakah collection. Primarily for us of importance is Muzaki education. I believe it starts there. Anything related to the deen in our country is not automatic because it is not a Muslim country. We have to create those structures. We have to create Islamic universities, Islamic schools, madrasas, where that education and the essence of the deen and that which, right at the beginning I spoke about Sheikh Yusuf, that which he brought to South Africa is built on, and we continue to understand our deen. So Muzaki education and advocacy is important for us, but we also translate all of that into the context of our reality. Also advice and guidance in terms of the fiqh of zakah. We have our zakah consultants in our structure. So a Muzaki can come and have a session with a consultant, and they would give zakah and guidance, particularly to that individual's circumstances. Then also the calculation of zakah is part of that advice and guidance. Then we facilitate the transaction of zakah payment. And then there is the communication and the feedback loop in terms of where that zakah distribution had gone. And then obviously if that individual or that Muzaki feels that this is the organization that they like to channel their zakah through for the following year, it then channels back into, again, the advice and the guidance to calculating their zakah the following year. On the zakah distribution aspect, we have an application process of the mustahiq to approach us. So the South African National Zakah Fund is present in most parts of the country. We have 8 main centers nationally, but we have 29 offices. So each center might have a number of offices in that particular area or region. So the mustahiq can do an application, and then there is the process of the Zakah eligibility assessment, and there's either purely the welfare assistance, but more importantly, what we're trying to focus on more is the development programs. We do find that it starts with welfare assistance, but we encourage that family or that individual to enroll in our development program. That then becomes part of our monitoring and output and reporting. And we're starting to go through a process of evaluating the impact. We were very, very excited this past financial year to report our first graduates that went through our bursary program. So this might seem insignificant for maybe a BAZNAS or an organizations that has been running for many years. But for us, 116 graduates this past year having come through our bursary program was phenomenal for us, because that means we have walked the road with them for 4 or 5 years to finally complete their studies, and now to be able to enter the working environment and then be able to fend for themselves and their families, inshallah. Within this, we definitely have to ensure that our whole model is Sharia compliant, because it's not automatic. The laws and the rules of the country, we have to adapt our model to ensure that there's a balance between maintaining the law, but more importantly, being compliant to the rules of Sharia. Governance and reporting and monitoring and evaluation is key focus areas, but then we also have our administration, which looks to the normal operating support function of HR, finance, marketing, and obviously IT. A lot of the bottom bits that you see there requires investment of funds, and because Zakah goes mostly to the distribution component, we do many fundraising initiatives, and we look for other funding to support our organization so that we can be more effective and efficient in the service that we provide. When it comes to governance, alhamdulillah, in June, we received the Global Good Governance Award in the category of capacity building by the Global Good Governance 3G Awards community. And it talks to also our structure. So as a structure, SANZAF is guided by a board of trustees, and then we have our national office bearers that constitutes the chair, the deputy chairs, our national treasury, our secretariat. And from there is the role of the chief executive officers, but we also have regional executive boards, because as I mentioned to you, we have 8 regions in the country, and each region has an executive board, and in that executive board there are regional office bearers, and each regional head reports directly through to me in respect of what's happening in that particular region, and they manage their own regional office, where I manage also the national office, which is the central structure for our organization. Also part of our governance is that we are governed by the terms and conditions of our trustee, which is an important component of our ability to operate as an NPO, a non-profit organization. So we registered that. We also registered as a public benefit organization. So what that does is, as a public benefit organization, we are able to issue what we call Section 18A certificates. And a Section 18A certificate is in effect a tax incentive. So the government recognizes that individuals in the country that gives donations to registered non-profit organizations are able to get a tax benefit. And I think in many Muslim countries, there are those kind of incentives. And this is the only incentive we can offer, is to register as a public benefit organization, comply with all the rules in the country, to operate as a public benefit organization. And then when an individual pays their zakat to us, we're able to issue a PBO certificate, and they can get certain tax concessions on that. Our trustees take overall responsibility of the organization, which is registered also as a trust. They meet annually. We have elections that take place every 3 years, and that is important because many organizations have individuals that run for years and years and years, and it becomes part of a personal organization. And we are a public organization, so we do elections every 3 years. And our national office bearers, as I mentioned, which consist of our chairperson, our treasurer, secretary as well, they oversee the strategic direction. The CEO then becomes responsible for the achievement of the organization's strategic objectives, and that is the translation of strategic objectives into a business plan and executing that business plan. Our regional managers then manages regional offices and delivers to operational objectives. We also have external audit committees and our national treasury that's responsible for our finance matters, because you can well understand if we are collecting hundreds of millions of rands, how important it is that we are able to report on our finances. We have other portfolio committees in the organization related to Zakah income, Zakah distribution, as well as HR, marketing, and IT to ensure that there's consistency across our organization, because we are a growing organization. And currently, it might not seem a lot in relation to bigger organizations, but currently we have 122 staff members around the country. Every year, through our governance, we issue a statement of compliance, and that is important because the public wants to see what it is and what our status is as an organization. And we issue a statement of compliance every year to indicate that the trust complies with all the relevant legislations, the policies, and the regulations in the country. And also that we are in good standing with, so SARS is the South African Revenue Services in respect of income tax. So we are exempted from paying tax because we are a non-profit organization, but we pay income tax on behalf of our employees. So that is PAYE, which is just a South African term. And VAT, we do get exempted, but we must submit our VAT schedules, and we do get a refund on VAT that we've paid for running our projects. We also, our statement of compliance needs to show that we are compliant with the Department of Social Development so that we can maintain our NPO status. And we also must show that we are compliant with the Department of Labor in terms of their Workmen's Compensation Fund, because we are essentially an employer in this country, and therefore certain rules and regulations apply to us in how we act as an employer to the staff that we have. In terms of delegation of authority, that's an important aspect of our governance. We have authority levels for administrative and trust payments. So trust payment is what we call Zakah payments, and admin payments is also important for us because we, as an AMIL, must make sure that in terms of our expenses that we manage that and the category of AMILUN is applied. We also work to pre-approve budgets. So when we look at the year, we give ourselves a target in terms of what we're wanting to collect for Zakah, what we're wanting to distribute for Zakah, and also how much of that we're wanting to make sure our operating expenses is maintained and complied with. We also run internal audits to ensure that we are compliant to our own policies and procedures. Just in this past year, alhamdulillah, we believe that we were able to impact over 500,000 individuals through our various projects and programs. For our Ramadan outreach program, we assisted over 300,000 individuals. For our Operation Kurbani, we assisted over 100,000 individuals. And through many of our welfare programs, we assist 25,000 people for the year. And of that 25,000, 70% we have found is assisting women in South Africa. So we find that many of the people coming to us, the mustahiq, is 70% of that are women coming to us for assistance. So a lot of the statistics that I've put out there is just about what we were able to do. And also to the left, you will see, and alhamdulillah, when we as a country went into lockdown in March and April, that there was an outpour of generosity of Muslims in South Africa. We were able to distribute 10 million rand in response to that, and it was mostly in respect of food relief. So that resulted in over 20 tons of food being collected and distributed, and then 80,000 needy individuals benefited from food hampers that we distributed. So our income that we collected this past financial year was 167 million, alhamdulillah, and we managed to distribute 139 million by the end of our financial year. So that speaks to a bit of a surplus that we hold, but that surplus was purely because we held bursary money. So we do not like to have a surplus. We want to every year distribute what we collect. But what happened this year was, because the education institutions closed during COVID, we weren't able to pay over the bursary funds to the institutions in respect of commitments we made to students. So we had to accrue about 30 million, and that has now been paid. So it's essentially payments of the zakah we collected then happened within the financial cycle. So we tried to distribute within the 12 months of receiving the zakah. When I spoke about the developmental component that we're starting to look at, as I said, SANZAF started as an organization purely to assist welfare relief, but we are now looking to the development component of this. So 5,000 students, alhamdulillah, is impacted every year by SANZAF. In terms of early childhood development, we currently have 300 youngsters or toddlers in our program. In terms of tertiary education, we're hitting around 1,000 that we offer assistance to. Vocational training is the assistance that we give to those who might have left school or dropped out of school, who we can, and those are adults, who can now do short courses, but we put them in accredited short courses. So that would be maybe a welding course, a mechanic course, a computer course, and maybe it's a 6-month course or a 9-month course. And they're able to walk away with an accredited certificate that allows them to at least find some employment. In terms of Islamic studies, we find many of the South Africans wanting to study in Egypt, in Mecca, in Medina, and even in Malaysia, some of the universities. Currently, we fund 944 students to study Islamic studies, because we believe that that will bring back the knowledge back to South Africa, and we can grow our Muslim community through a better understanding of the deen. And then in terms of youth and community development, we do a lot of support of students or learners at school, where we do mentorship on a Saturday. We take students through extra tuition to help them get through the schooling system. So a lot of what we do is related to the development of the learner, so that inshallah there is sustainability of our programs over the long term. One thing I'm wanting to pull out of all of this is, on your right, there's a block that says we hosted 25 Zakah seminars on radios and radio Q&As. So what we have is, during the month of Ramadan, we do have a lot of one-on-one Zakah seminars. So we would go through a process of talking to the importance of zakah, how to calculate zakah, what are the categories of zakah. But we also take to radio, because we find we can reach a lot more people. This Ramadan, we were in lockdown, so we couldn't, due to social distancing, do the one-on-one zakah seminars. And we then took much of our programs to radio and television. And alhamdulillah, we were able to reach a lot more Muslims in the country to take the message of zakah, because we believe that sustainability of institutionalized zakah is about how much education and knowledge there is about zakah. So when we talk about how we sustain ourselves as an organization, it's important because then it ensures that zakah does not just become an obligatory annual charity, but it becomes a form of social security. We have to educate our South Africans, Muslims, why it is important to channel their zakah through an institution. Because as I mentioned to you, almost half of the wealth in South Africa is still channeled through individuals paying their zakah themselves. So to sustain our organization, we have to educate how zakah becomes a form of social security, because we're able to take a family and put them on a program. If an individual pays zakah to a family, it might be a one-off payment, and that family may not see that muzaki again. But if they work through us, we look at the family, we understand the entire situation, and we put them on a program for the entire family. And we call that in SANZAF terms, adopt a family model, where we take the entire family, we look at the circumstances, we look at the need, and we try and put the father through something, the mother, and support the children through whatever educational or training that they need. And institutionalized zakah, we believe, is a coordinated and structured way, and it allows us to monitor our efforts and to be able to look at the impact that we do. Because if you pool your funds together, you are able to do more. And that's the message we send out here in South Africa, that if everybody pool their zakah with a zakah institution, so if you look at the 167 million that we collected, we are definitely able to do a lot more than an individual maybe distributing their zakah independently. It is not wrong, we understand that, that is the muzaki's right, and they have the choice to do that, but we wanting to encourage them to, because there is no government structure that kind of governs the payment of zakah through an institution, we have to do the education ourselves. So of course there are challenges. We know, as I mentioned earlier, when we looked at those maps, there are contrasting wealth in the Muslim world. We see many Muslims very poor, and we see many Muslims having in excess of the wealth that they actually need. But we also know that it is those that have that must take care of those that do not have. We also see some of the challenges because of lack of accountability and governance. And then there are also certain ideological differences that presents its own challenges for zakah management. But when it comes to the issue of zakah and Awqaf, the principles are simple and it's universal. And alhamdulillah, we are able to benefit from that in the way that we are using zakah and Awqaf to assist and fight poverty in our country. In closing, what we believe that advocating zakah in a Muslim minority country is about pushing the importance of Islamic values. Yes, there is financial obligations, and we pushing particularly the importance of returning back to the essence of zakah. You know, the true purpose of what zakah was intended. We do focus as zakah management institutions on the mechanics of zakah. We do focus on how the transactions work in terms of getting the systems right. We do focus on ensuring that it's done annually. But we are appealing, and when we talk to our counterparts, is that we up the focus of what the purpose is of zakah, what the principle is of sharing, and most importantly, doing this in seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. So we believe to reap the invaluable benefits of zakah and Awqaf requires that the Muslim embrace it as a means to achieving peace and prosperity through social justice that zakah and Awqaf brings. And then truly we can also untap its potential in addressing as well the poverty in the world, as well as the sustainable development goals. And this is my closing slides. Loving for your brother what you wish for yourselves. because there is the hadith that says none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. And at SANZAF, we profess this, we advocate this, because we believe the sustainability of our organization in collecting zakah and addressing poverty through zakah and Awqaf can only be successful if we believe in this particular saying that we want for our brother what we want for ourselves. And that is essentially my presentation. From a slides perspective, I think we do have some questions. I'm going to hand over to Ahmed to facilitate that.
Thank you very much, Madam Yasmina. What you have delivered about some experiences in Zakah and Awqaf, especially in Muslim minority country, has really opened our perceptions. Well, now let us continue to Q&A session, Madam. How many questions should we have, Madam?
I think just from a timing point of view, because it's Friday in South Africa and we will do Jumu'ah soon, I would have 10 minutes for questions. So maybe let's do 3 or 4 now and see if there's still time, and we'll take more.
Okay, thank you. Because some of the question that I read is likely the same, I will generalize all of them. The question is, first, how SANZAF collect and distributing fund? Is there any obstacles in the activity of SANZAF? It can be political issue or pandemic issue or anything else. Then how SANZAF solve the issues, and how the development of technology or digitalization issue there due to development of Zakah and Waqaf. That's all, Madam.
Okay. So I think if I can start off with the challenges, whether it's political challenges or what are the challenges. So I think from our perspective, Alhamdulillah, I think the Muslim community had played a very active role in politics in South Africa. And so when we started fighting apartheid many years ago, Muslims were very active, because I think we believe that oppression is wrong. And so Muslims were quite active in fighting poverty, so fighting oppression and fighting the white majority rule at the time. And with that came a recognition of the Muslim community. And with that, many Muslims entered strategic roles in government. And that then allowed us to have a voice. So the Muslim community, albeit a small proportion, if I take a very kind of extreme number, if I take the maximum and I say we are even 5% of the population, which is maybe overstated, but let's say 5% of the population. Even if we are 5% of the population, we enjoy, therefore, a disproportionate share of voice to our size, in that Muslims are heard, we are allowed to practice our deen, alhamdulillah, we are allowed to organize ourselves. We have many Muslim schools, we have Muslim universities, many Muslim organizations. And as I said also earlier, I alluded to Sharia compliant financial institutions in South Africa. So the knowledge of Islam in South Africa is, alhamdulillah, at a sophisticated level, because we have access to platforms such as these as well, and because many of our Muslims are educated overseas. So they are able to bring that knowledge of even finance and economics, and then translate that into how it would work in a South African environment and work around those rules. And alhamdulillah, we've been able to establish that. And so there is a lot of recognition for Muslims in South Africa. So from a political perspective, we don't have many challenges, but where the politics do play a part is that historically it has segregated us as a nation. So race in terms of whites and blacks and coloreds, and coloreds is an interesting concept because coloreds came from that part of the community where we, as descendants of Indonesians and Malaysians, were called Cape Malay. So we weren't black, as in indigenous Africans, but we weren't white either. So they had to find a name for us, and they called us coloreds. And then essentially they subcategorized us into Cape Malays because we were different to the Karoo coloreds, which were the San community. But essentially, that aside, that's historical. We are now one nation. We do not have apartheid anymore. We see ourselves as one community. But the legacy of apartheid, and where politics do play a part in South Africa, is we still see poverty in pockets. We still see communities because we were structured in such a way that the black communities are still living in a lot of poverty because they weren't taken care of by the previous government. There weren't social support for those, for black communities. And if I were to maybe talk about colored communities even as a separate entity, which we don't particularly like to do, but corruption, crime is rife because gangsterism and drugs were orchestrated in those communities to keep us oppressed. So from a political point of view, the need for Zakah and Awqaf and all of those Islamic social finance tools is more needed in the previously disadvantaged communities. So the political landscape then leads us to a point where a lot of the efforts of the Zakah institutions currently in South Africa needs to be directed to the parts of our country where the previous regime did not take care of. So alhamdulillah, there is support from our current government, but it will take many years because we've been in apartheid for a long time. It was structural apartheid. It was injustice of another form, and it will take time. We're still seeing that legacy, but we believe that if all our NGOs work collectively, inshallah, we can address that. On the issue of digitization, so when I put up the SANZAF model, I specifically spoke to the administration of Zakah, which was at the bottom. On the one part, we had Zakah collection. On the other part, we had Zakah distribution. But when it comes to the administration of Zakah, it needs investment. And we do not use Zakah funds necessarily there, except the Amilun for the portion of some of our employee costs. But for development and for building IT systems and digitizing our entire model requires financial investment. So we don't have that kind of funding ourselves. We, like I said, we do fundraising efforts, but we have a lot of other administrative expenses that we have to take care of, like rentals and buildings and, you know, all of those. But we're doing it in a structured approach. So currently, some of our systems are digitized and some we are still doing. So if you look at the application process, we are digitizing the application process where the mustahiq can make an application digitally, and then we call for them to come in. So we do the first assessment digitally. From the Muzaki side, many of our processes on the collection of Zakah has been digitized. So even from the point of online receipting, snap scan, whether we do website payments, we have given the Muzaki many forms of being able to pay their Zakah digitally, and that has been easier for us because of the sophistication, inshallah, of the mustahiq. But we have found that in South Africa, the sophistication of the muzaki. But in South Africa, the mustahiq is also quite digitally savvy. So we are moving towards trying to go to e-wallet, inshallah, so that we can also use some of that where we find that fintech has played a role in kind of banking the unbanked, is to maybe go from those platforms and start to utilize those systems to be able to also deal from a IT perspective, from a digital. But at the moment, it is a challenge from a funding point of view. But inshallah, as the funds come, the plan is there. We can roll out the digitization of our model. Ahmad, do you want to remind me of the other question?
I think it's enough, Madam, because as we know, in South Africa is now nearing the zero time.
Yes.
Thank you for the answer, Madam Yasmina. I think it's all for the Q&A session for this first lecture. Unfortunately, our agenda is very tight, and I really apologize that we don't have enough time to have all questions answered. And as we know, Madam Yasmina doesn't have more time because in South Africa is now nearing Zuhur or Jumu'ah prayer on this blessed Friday. Madam Yasmina, please do stay on your screen for a second. Of our gratitude for you, please accept it with our sincere thanks. Operator, can we show the certificate?
Jazakallah, much appreciated. It's been my pleasure.
Madam. Before we close this session, is there anything else you would like to say, Madam? How about the assignment or the quiz, or maybe a closing statement?
Yes, I think the quiz, I've kept it fairly simple, so it's going to be an easy one. Some of the questions is just true or false, and it is related to what I have just spoken about, so it should be fairly simple. I wanted to give you an easy Friday. But just from our side, I have to use this opportunity to thank BAZNAS, particularly for this opportunity. Sometimes we feel we don't have much to share because BAZNAS being an organization that has almost to some extent perfected the model, and we still have a long way to go, but we appreciate the networking opportunities that we get. We appreciate the opportunity to learn from many of the other presenters that has also presented over this week, but also we learn from the questions that we receive. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers and yourself, Ahmed, for facilitating this, and to the participants. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you success with this particular winter school, and may the knowledge be beneficial for you, and may you become agents of change in your endeavor to make life better for others, inshallah. Jazakallah.
Madam. Thank you very much, Madam. Nice to meet you. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, our time is very limited. This is the end of our first lecture today. Once again, we would like to express our gratitude to Madam Yasmina Francke, so generously sharing your valuable time, knowledge, and wisdom with us. We are very fortunate to have listened to what you have explained in your presentation today. May Allah bless you. And we do apologize as you may find inconveniences from us throughout the session. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget that we still have our second lecture for today by Professor Abdul Ghafar Ismail, who will talk about Zakah in Malaysia, which will begin at 6:30 p.m. Western Indonesian time, or Ba'da Maghrib by Indonesian time. So hopefully all of the participants can return again to the virtual room 5 minutes before the start of the second lecture. Wallahu alam. Let's close this session by saying hamdalah and dua kifaratul majlis. Alhamdulillah subhanakallahumma bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Jazakillah, Madam Yasmina.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Peace be upon you. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Allah still gives us the opportunity to continue our agenda today. The second lecture will discuss about the experiences of Zakah in Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, our second lecturer for today is a prominent figure from Islamic economics, particularly in Malaysia. He is a professor of Islamic Financial Economics at Universiti Sains Islam Malaysia. Actually, he has a lot of professional experiences, but I will mention several experiences relevant to his topic today. He is currently a chairman, Task Force Committee for Public Funding, Universiti Sains Islam Malaysia. He is also a consultant for Ministry of National Development Planning regarding Indonesia Islamic Economics Master Plan. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, please welcome Professor Abdul Ghafar Ismail. Assalamualaikum, Professor.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Can you hear
How are
my,
you?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes, clearly,
Alhamdulillah.
Professor.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. We are very honored to have you with us today, Professor. Before we continue, Professor, how do you want to have a Q&A session? Would you prefer having Q&A session during the presentation? So
you can do it simultaneously.
Okay.
Yeah, you can ask during my lecture, or you can have after the lecture. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. As Professor Abdul Ghafar said, all participants are allowed to ask questions in the middle of his presentation. Right, Professor?
Okay. How many hours? How many minutes? 1.5.
How many?
Presentation for Professor 1 hour, and then a
Okay.
Q&A session for 30 minutes.
Okay, for 30 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
Let I start with my. I can share with you my slide, right?
Yes, Professor.
Sister Marhama?
Yes, Professor.
I share with you my slide.
Oh, okay.
I want to share with you.
Okay.
Class, yeah. I can. Is it the one? Can you see that?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, Professor.
All right. Okay, Brother Ahmad.
Okay. Without ado, let's immediately begin our second lecture. Professor,
okay.
The time and screen is yours.
Ya, okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Rabbi ishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. I've been given a slot to discuss on this topic on a Zakat in Malaysia, a case study. So what I'm going to do in this lecture is to have this learning outcome. So we are going to discuss the constitution rules in relation to Zakat, and then explain.
Pardon me, Professor.
Pardon?
Can it be like a full screen?
Oh, sorry. Full screen, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Yes, Prof.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
So what I'm going to discuss in this is at the end of the lecture, you learn something about the constitution, and especially the constitution rules in relation to Zakat. And then the second one is explain the contribution of Zakat in the state budget. And third is examine the working of fiscal policy in the presence of Zakat. So this is the 3 learning outcomes that I'm going to discuss in this lecture, right? I think I have already communicated this material with my what I call it liaison sister Elia. Am I right, Marhama? Or Ahmad, brother Ahmad?
Excuse me.
Yeah, I already already sent this material to sister Alia
Yes,
regarding
yes.
regarding the free lecture test.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so I want to test you a little bit about your knowledge before we can proceed further. First, my question is, or my test is on constitutional economics, a study about law and ideology. So the question is yes or no. Okay, the second question is, the constitution would have been different if men with different interests had written it, yes or no. Third is fiscal problem are under the article of constitution, yes or no. And then fourth, constitutional rule can be derived from Al-Quran and Sunnah, yes or no. And zakat is not considered as fiscal instrument, yes or no. Okay, so these the three question that I'm going to ask you. Maybe you have already the answer. Okay, my concern here in this lecture is what is actually the definition of constitutional economics. Have you heard about the constitutional economy? Anyone
It's
of
my
you?
first time.
Anyone of you have any knowledge about constitutional economics? Andika Surbakti.
Not yet, Professor.
Not yet.
Not yet.
You don't have any knowledge on this.
Yes, I don't know.
Have you read your Undang-Undang 1945?
Yes, I have.
What is inside the Undang-Undang?
The Constitution.
Yeah, we're talking about what?
About this several the pillar of the nation, and also in some verses there is also mention about economic, I think.
They also mentioned about economics.
Yes.
What are the subject of economics in the Constitution?
In our constitution, let's mention our what we say, the style of our economic system, which is Pancasila, cooperative, etc.
So your economic system follow the Pancasila.
Yes, Professor.
Okay. Anything about zakat in the Constitution?
In the Constitution, I cannot find.
Do you find that dana social line in the Constitution?
I have no idea about this, Professor.
Oh. What is our right? What is the obligation? The Constitution?
In the Constitution, yes, I think there is also about the right of the nation.
What your right? You have the right to own property.
Actually, we have right to own the property, but also in the Constitution mentioned that the land, the water is what we say be organized by the government to welfare of the nation.
Okay, so meaning that the government manage the resources.
Yes, Professor.
The resources. Okay, good. All right. So at least we know that some of the important terms in economics been mentioned in our Constitution, right? Okay.
Yes.
So okay. All right. So at least we have some idea on that. Okay. Now we look at whether zakat. We have the zakat in our Constitution. Okay. Because this is a case study in Malaysia, so I will look at from the Malaysian perspective, and then maybe you can, after this, you can have a look at your constitution, and then whether you have this provision or we have these rules inside your your constitution. Okay. So we look at zakat in the federal constitution. The constitution determines the extent of nation revenue raising authority. Okay, what type of revenue and how they are to be collected and distributed. Meaning that in a constitution also looking at the management of public finance. Okay, so if you look at, for example, the revenue, the nation revenue, what are the types of revenues that we have? We have the taxes, right? We have non-taxes, we have duty import, we have duty excise, and also we have what? If you park your car, then you have to pay the parking fee, right? Am I right? Am I right, Marhama? You park your car, then you have to pay your parking fee, right?
Yes, I am, sir.
So who collect that, the parking fee?
Yes, parking fee. That's
Who
right.
collects that?
Pemerintah daerah, regional government.
Regional, the local council.
Yeah, local government.
Local council. Okay.
Yes.
So meaning that you have the layers of government. How many layers of government do you have in your country?
Maybe 4.
At least 4.
At
What?
least 4.
Federal, province,
District.
district.
And the last is what we say, kecamatan.
The last is kecamatan.
Yes.
So each one of them have their power to collect revenues from different sources, right? For example, the federal government or the central government collect taxes, income tax or corporate tax, or duty, excise. Okay. So here we are talking about the constitutional rules also lead to the introduction of Islamic religious revenues as the sources of government revenues. So meaning that in Malaysia, we are not only looking at the revenues that come from the taxes, okay, the revenue that come from non-taxes, okay, like the parking fee, okay, like you pay the water fee, water tariff, or electricity tariff. But here you also receive your revenue that come from Islamic religious revenue. Okay, so maybe you can refer in the case of Indonesia, you have dana sosial keagamaan lain, DSKL. Am I right, Andika?
Right, Professor. Yes, dana sosial keagamaan lain.
Dana sosial keagamaan lain. What is the definition of dana sosial keagamaan lain?
As I remember and I learned, there is some like the revenue from BPKH, what we say, Hajj agency also, and infak. Hibah,
Sadaqah.
Hibah, yes, Professor.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you know that this is, in Indonesia you have the similar term, you call it dana sosial keagamaan lain. But in Malaysia we have the Islamic religious revenue as the sources of government revenue. So in Malaysia, constitutional economics, this is economy, that is a branch of economic that study the relationship between economics and law. Okay, how can the constitutional rules, okay, affect the market and also affect the institution, right? So here in Malaysia, we have the constitutional economy which treat Islamic religious revenue as a tool for socio-economic development. So we can refer this in, if you want to look into it, you can refer to our constitution in part 7 on financial provision, article 97 to 112. Okay. Now we look at the financial matters that have been discussed in constitution. Okay. If you look at the constitution, we have the provision, or they call it the article, and then we have the what matter about what, and this. So then I will describe that. Okay. For example, Article 96. So discuss matter about taxes. Okay. What is tax? This tax is the tax is imposed by the federal government. Okay. In Article 97, okay, we have the federal consolidated fund, we have the state consolidated fund, and also Islamic Religious Fund. So the rules in the Constitution says that we have three different funds. Okay, Federal Consolidated Fund, State Consolidated Fund, and Islamic Religious Fund. So what is Islamic Religious Fund? That is what I'm going to discuss in this lecture. Okay, so Islamic Religious Fund consists of Zakat, Fitrah, Baitul Mal, or similar Islamic religious revenue. What is Islamic religious revenue? This is the subject maybe you have to learn more, or you have to find out what are the definition, or what is the definition of similar and Islamic religious revenue. Okay, you know that Fidyah, Andika?
Yes.
Or Asif? You know Fidyah?
Yes, Prof.
You know Kafara?
Yes.
Yes, Prof.
You know Luqata?
Lukota. Yes, I Lukota.
Okay. We have the sadaqah, we have sadaqah wajib, so we have the compulsory sadaqah, we have the voluntary sadaqah, and then we have the others like fidyah, diyan, luqata, okay, al-faiz, okay.
Yes.
So all are considered as the Islamic religious revenues. So that revenues goes to the state money, okay. And then I want to discuss on what are the items that are going to be discussed in Article 98 and so on, because you can refer to in the Constitution. So what I'm going to look into more detail about this is because we have a federal system where Malaysia follow this federal system. This is not like Indonesia. Indonesia follow which system, Andika?
We are a federal system, I think.
You follow the unitary system, right?
Yes.
You follow the unitary system where you have the president, and then you have the province, and then you have the
District.
Yes, the district, the region.
Regional, and then you have the kecamatan, right?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
four layers of government, right?
Right, Prof.
But in Malaysia, we have only 3 layers where we follow the federal system. We have the federal, and then we have the state, and then we have the district, 3 level. So the power that has been given by federal rules, okay, and also the power that has been given by the state rule, and also the power that has been given to the district level or local council, 3 level, all right? So the second level of the government is a state law. Okay, where in the state law, if you look at, for example, Johor Sabah, okay, here, law of the state of Johor 1895, okay, and then it been discussed in the finance section, and then the provision in that section is this there are many provision in that section, and one of the section discussed about the estimated receipt provision 38 in bracket 3. Estimated receipt do not include zakat, fitrah, baitul mal, or similar Islamic religious revenue. So what does it mean? Means that now at the federal level, we have the Federal Consolidated Fund. Meaning that at the federal level, Ministry of Finance manage this fund. Consolidated Fund, Federal Consolidated Fund. At the state level, we have the State Consolidated Fund, which is managed by the state government. And then we have another fund, we call it the Baitul Mal Fund, which comprise all the types of Islamic religious revenue that will be parked under that fund. So meaning that we have 3 funds, and not only 3, but we have the last one is a fund which is owned by the local council. Meaning that the federal have only 1 consolidated fund, state have 2 funds. One is a state consolidated fund, and another one is the Islamic religious fund, or later on we will discuss that as a Baitul Mal fund. And the third one is a local council fund. Okay, and because the state are managed differently. So therefore, each state, you look at, for example, Sabah, one of the state in Malaysia, also discuss about this item, okay, about the financial provision. Also in the case of Sarawak, where the financial provision also mentioned about the Zakat and also other Islamic religious revenue. And one of the state, another state is Selangor, where in Selangor we also have the Zakat, Fitrah, Baitumal, or other Islamic religious revenue. So meaning that the state law also recognize that Islamic religious revenues as the sources of government revenue. All right? Right. And because of, as I mentioned earlier, that the state have two accounts. One is the state consolidated fund, and the second one is the Baitul Mal fund. So meaning that in this case, we need to have an institution that manage that money, the Islamic religious fund or Baitul Mal fund. Okay. Therefore, the state enacted rules related to the religion of Islam, where in the, for example, the state of Johor, under the section of Baitul Mal and financial procedures of the Majlis, okay, they need to establish the Baitul Mal fund, as mentioned in section 81. The same also goes to Sabah, under the enactment 2004 Majlis Ulama Islam Negeri Sabah enactment, also need to establish the Baitul Mal fund. Okay, and the same also goes to others, other state, Sarawak and also Selangor. So meaning that each state in Malaysia, they have their own law related to Baitul Mal fund. Okay, so remember that at the federal level, we have the federal consolidated fund. At the state level, we have the state consolidated fund. But at the state level, we also have the Baitul Mal fund. And of course, at the local council, we have the local council fund. Okay, so this is how we look at the management of Zakat or the management of Baitul Mal. Okay, because one of the fund under the Baitul Mal is Zakat, is managed by the state, not managed by the federal government. Or in other words, Zakat is one of the revenues of the state government. It's not considered as the revenue of the federal government. Right? So what we can learn from there, the constitutional rule. Okay? So constitutional rule, what can we learn from the rules? Because we learn from the Qanun Malaka, that we learn it from the, because Islam came first to Malacca during this period, 1400 until 1511 Gregorian. And then we have the Undang-Undang or Tubuh Negeri Johor, is one of the older state in Malaysia. We have the Johor State Law, 1895, and our federal constitution that was established or that was passed by the parliament in 1957. Okay, so if we look at the provision related to economic matters in Malaysia Constitution, we have already embedded that the discipline of tafsir or exegesis, which is the explanation of the divine book of Al-Quran, because as you know that the zakat is wajib or zakat is compulsory, and then it is the rules related to zakat is embedded in our constitution. Okay, so zakat is embedded in our constitution, not only at the federal constitution, but also at the state constitution, and also under the subset of the state constitution is the enactment of the state government. Okay, so from there you can see that discussion of economic issues, the discipline of fiqh or Islamic economic jurisprudence are embedded in our constitutional rules. So what we can learn from there is the constitution can expand the sources of revenue for socio-economic purposes. Or al-ahkam or Quranic rule are translated as constitution. Meaning that if in the Quran says that zakat is compulsory for us to pay zakat, so these rules are embedded. I mean, the rules related to zakat is embedded in our constitution. Okay. Again, so I need to repeat again that item 97 in bracket 3 of Federal Constitution, zakat, fitrah, baitul mal, or similar Islamic religious revenue shall be paid into a separate fund and shall not be paid out except under the authority of the state law or federal law. So meaning that in Malaysia, in our constitution, and you can also refer to other constitution in Organization of Islamic Cooperation, member countries, also some state mention that these two words, okay, Islam as an official religion of a particular country, okay, and another one is the Islamic religious revenue. So two important things about Islam are mentioned in the constitution. Okay, and then if we look at the Islamic economic model for economic development, or meaning that if you recognize that zakat as a revenue, so meaning that this is actually the Islamic economic model for development, economic development of Ummah, where it is already embedded in our constitution, right? So what is our expectation or economic interpretation of the rules? Okay. So normally what we learn in economics is about the Keynesian views. Okay, when the government spend more, so people can, I mean, the economy can be generated if the government spends more, especially during the COVID period right now, where government introduced the fiscal stimulus package and the government spend more. The reason why, because they want to generate the economy. So this is what they call it as the Keynesian views. But on the other hand, we also have the government expenditure through the tax. Okay, I mean the sources of revenues come from the tax, and then this tax used to finance the government budget. Okay, but on the other hand, we have another model in the constitution where government revenue can also come from zakat. So meaning that if the government want to spend, this revenue come from zakat. So if you look from the economic perspective, or we can interpret it from the economic perspective, it shows that if you want to provide public goods, okay, to your citizen, you can have this, you can provide these public goods. Okay, for example, you can build bridges, or you can build you can have a school building, for example. You can spend that from the taxes that you collect. Okay, but here you can also provide, for example, scholarship, or you can provide financial assistance to low-income group. You can do that through the zakat. So because that revenues belong to the government. So the government can use zakat to provide public good. Okay. So this is the issues that we can look into it, where government expenditure can come from tax. Government expenditure can also come from zakat. Okay. So I want to see that from the example, again, the example of several states in Malaysia. I will show where zakat is considered or is considered as part of the component in the state budget. Meaning that if you look at the anggaran, what do you call it? APBD, yeah? Pak Handika?
APBD, Prof. Yes.
Yes, Prof.
APBD. What is
Anggaran
APBD?
pendapatan daerah. Is the meaning.
Anggaran pendapatan daerah. So meaning that anggaran pendapatan daerah also comprise the zakat. Okay. So this happen to, I will give you the example of Wilayah Persekutuan and Selangor. Okay. Where are we now? Okay. Where is Selangor? Where is Kuala Lumpur? Where is Federal Territory? Okay. If you look at from this, I'm sure that you have been in Malaysia. Okay. We have 14 states. Okay. Like Indonesia, maybe you have how many provinces? 37. 37 or 35? Anika? Or Marhama?
34.
How many provinces? You have 34. So we have only 14 states. Okay. And it is based on, this is not very recent figures. In 2010, because I could not get the recent figures, that I got it from the current map. Okay. Where if you look at from these figures, the country that is below the poverty line is actually this country, this state, Kelantan. So meaning that the gross state GDP per capita is one of the lowest. Okay, so meaning that many people are in poverty in this area. Okay, whereas in other states, they are considered more majority of them they are above the poverty line. Okay, so if you look at the state here, of course, Federal Territory and also Selangor here with a blue color is among the country which has a GDP per capita among the highest in GDP per capita in Malaysia. So meaning that they are more wealthier than the other state. And then if you consider that as one of the hypotheses, like say, the more people who are wealthy, then you can pay higher zakat. Okay, so this is we look at this from this perspective. Also, we can see from this figure where GDP per capita by state 2017 until 2018. For example, GDP per capita in Ringgit Malaysia is in the Federal Territory of Kuala Lumpur is 121,293, or in US dollars about 30,000 US dollars. 30,000 GDP per capita, 30,000 US dollars. Okay, and the case of Selangor is 51,528, where it is equivalent to 11,000 US dollars GDP per capita. Okay, and then we look at the national level, GDP per capita is about 44,682. So this is about 11 something like that, 11,000 US dollars GDP per capita. Okay, so if we look from that, because we mentioned that earlier, that zakat is one of the state revenue. Okay, and then if you look at the government revenues, which the government revenue does not include zakat, and also we have the Islamic religious revenue here, the third column. Okay, the Islamic religious revenue, and then we have the government revenue. Okay, I'll give you an example. In 2000, let's say in 2018, Federal Territory State Government received revenue about 1,490.7 million. 1,490.7 billion or 1.5 billion. And then state Islamic religious revenue collect about 872.7 million. And the substantial amount or the main amount come from Zakat. The Islamic religious revenue comprised about 657.4. Okay, so if we look from that figure, seems that Zakat about how much then? It's about 70%? More than 70%, right, of the Islamic religious revenues. So other than Zakat, only comprise a small percentage. Maybe the next Islamic revenues need to be explored further is Awqaf. Okay, Awqaf becomes the second largest component of the Islamic religious revenue. So if you look at from this figure, okay, from this figure, more than half of the government revenue. Okay, more than half, meaning that maybe 10 years from now or maybe 5 years from now, Islamic religious revenue, maybe the revenue is higher than the government revenue. Okay, the same goes to Selangor. For example, Islamic religious revenue in 2018 is 1,073 million, and Zakat comes comprised about 807.7 million. And the government revenues is 21357, meaning that Islamic religious revenues only how many then? Half. If you look at before that, in 2014, government revenues 3,200.9 million, but Islamic religious revenues only 621 million. So meaning that only 1/5 now become half. You just imagine that what happened the next 5 years or the next 10 years, maybe the Islamic religious revenue will surpass, okay, higher than the government revenues. And these revenues mainly come from Zakat. So if you want to have more revenues, maybe you can go into others item of the Islamic religious revenue. For example, Awqaf, Sadaqah, Luqata, maybe, or Al-Fai, or Diyat, or Kafarah. So if we have that, so maybe we can have a bigger size of Islamic religious revenues compared to the government revenues. So in terms of the APBN of the state, meaning that the substantial contribution are shown by the Islamic religious revenue and especially the Zakat. All right. So what are the initiatives that have been taken to enhance Zakat revenue? Okay. Maybe you heard about the privatization policy. Okay. It happened in 1980s. Economics, we learned about the privatization policy where when the government cannot do that efficiently, so that we ask the private sector to come in to do the or to provide the services. So here we have the privatization policy where government asks the private sectors to form an institution that can collect and also distribute zakat. Okay. And the second one is the entrepreneurship development program, where the aim is to improve, to bring about sustained improvement in the well-being of individual growth, family, community, and society at large is very paramount. Meaning that the aim is to improve the well-being of the citizen. And then it can be done through the entrepreneurship development program, meaning that we create more entrepreneur, and then create the entrepreneur, so we, the funding come from the zakat, where through the entrepreneurship program, the aim is to help the poor. Okay, because normally the poor is they don't want to change their lifestyle. due to certain reason. Okay, they are very comfortable in that zone because you receive money from the, for example, from the Zakat authority, and then keep on receiving the money from the Zakat authority. So the target in this program is to change their lifestyle or to change their culture, where we ask them to be an entrepreneur. And then by doing that, finally, they can improve their life, or they can overcome their hardship, and then they become the zakat payers later on. Okay, and then another initiative through the zakat revenue is from the computer and automation revolution. This is related to industrial revolution 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, or 4.0. So especially in Malaysia, where we benefited a lot from the IR 3.0. Okay, from the IR 3.0, we computerized the system, the Baitul system, and by having that, we can collect more zakat through the IT system, and the results are proven in their efficiency of the delivery system, and also not only the efficiency of the delivery system, but also in efficiency, the effectiveness of their delivery system. So, for example, if let's say in one village, you have the asnaf, fakir or miskin, just send through your WhatsApp, or maybe you throw your apps application to inform the zakat authority that in this area you have the fakir and miskin, so they will do the investigation, and then after that they will make a decision to provide the financial assistance to the poor and also to the needy. So by having this computer or automation revolution, we can improve our delivery system that can make more efficient and effective. Okay. And another part is the good governance. The good governance, it can improve the socio-economic development of a country. Because the good governance is how do you engage with your stakeholders. Because the stakeholders here is we're talking about, maybe you can search more in this perspective on the good governance. One is we are talking about the rule itself, whether the zakat authority have a good rules or rules in place. Okay, not only the rule in place, but also the governance structure. Okay, you are answerable to whom, and then to which stakeholders. By having that good governance, you can improve your performance. Okay. And finally, the initiative to enhance zakat revenues come from the payment system. Okay, I'm sure that you know that now we can pay zakat through the e-zakat payment. You just click in front of your computer screen, and then you can pay your zakat to that without going to the zakat office, or without going to the premises of the zakat collector, or the amil premises. Okay, or you can also the zakat authority also have a MOU with the banking institution, where we can pay our zakat through the internet banking, and also in the rural area, where we have the post office branches in the rural area, so it enables the rural people to collect the money that they receive from the zakat authority to post office, or they also can pay zakat through post office branches. Okay, and also you can pay through bank counters if you don't have the internet, or you don't have the zakat payment facilities, so you can pay through the bank counters. Right now, the next issue is on, because zakat is considered as the government revenues, because the budget need to be distributed to the asnaf. Okay, so they can improve their well-being, meaning that because government revenue is part of the instrument of fiscal policy. So you look at the working of fiscal policy, we need to know about two. One, what is the instrument of? If let's say you have the policy to improve the well-being of the ummah, so what is the instrument? Can you use zakat as instrument? Yeah, how does it work? If you have this zakat as a fiscal policy, okay. So in this perspective, zakat can be categorized into as a revenue receipt, capital receipt, or trust fund. Because in the government, the government budget, we have this category: revenue receipt, capital receipt, or trust fund. Okay, and we have another, like say, another what the Islamic religious revenues, let's say Awqaf. Can Awqaf be categorized as revenues received, capital received, or trust fund? So you need to study further on this. What is revenue? Revenue is the one that you receive and then you pay. Capital meaning that you can retain. Whereas in the trust fund, let's say some of the money, if you don't, let's say you pay taxes, okay, you pay taxes and then you pay more than as required. So that's the excess need to be transferred to the trust fund, because this money is not belong to the government. This money should be returned to the taxpayers. So it need to be put in the trust fund. So can zakat be categorized as revenue received, capital received, or trust fund? So this is very important. Okay, but basically zakat is considered as the fiscal policy instrument. So now how can we look at the working of fiscal policy? So normally, if you look at every year, okay, if you look at in the what annual budget of the state or of the province or maybe of the local council, they need to present this budget in the assembly. So we need to estimate. You have to present the estimated total resources. Okay. Not only that, you need to present the estimated total expenditure. Okay. So all this should be presented. So for example, consolidated Baitul Mal account also become the state revenue. So meaning that Baitul Mal fund also need to be presented. That happen in Indonesia, where the Baitul Mal zakat need to be presented, the sources and also the expenditure of the Baitul Mal or the zakat need to be presented at what? DPRD, yeah? Am I right, Rahma? DPRD or DPR? Anika, DPRD or DPR?
For national DPR, Prof.
But province level?
DPRD.
DPRD. So meaning that Baitul Mal budget of Baitul Mal in terms of revenue and expenditure need to be presented at DPRD assembly. This has happened in Malaysia, where this fund need to be presented, meaning that you are accountable to the member of the state assembly. Okay. So if you look at the size of your budgetary support for the budget plan, now you have already your budget. Okay, budgetary support for the budget plan. The next step is what is your budget program? So meaning that it need to be approved by the state assembly. Your budget program. What is your budget program? For example, you want to provide healthcare, free healthcare, or you want to have an income security for the poor and also needy, or you want to provide financial assistance to old age or elderly, or during the COVID the crisis or COVID pandemic, maybe some of you become unemployed. So we need to give some financial assistance to the unemployed. Okay. And then if let's say you go to the hospital and then you don't have money to pay your health bill, so we are able to provide the assistance to those who need that. Okay. or maternity leave or loss of the main income earner, so you are able to get the financial assistance from the Zakat authority, which already put in your budget program. Okay. So my question, this is my last slide. Last slide. Okay. Discussion question. Discuss on what type of revenue in Malaysia that can be collected by different layers of government. Second, in relation to question number 1, discuss in the context of Indonesia as a country who follow the unitary system. And number 3 is the Baitul Mal fund is defined as one fund in which shall flow every stream of public revenue, from which shall come the supply of every services. What can we learn from this definition? And the fourth one is please explain the working of fiscal policy in the presence of Zakat. Okay. And question number 5, does the cash management matter for Zakat? If you are working at the Accountant General Office, okay, how do you manage Baitul Mal cash? Okay. Do you have any question, Rezida Gabasova? You are from where, Rezida? You are from where, Rezida?
Assalamu alaikum. I am from Russia.
Oh, Russia. Oh, I see.
Yes.
I know from your name, Sova.
No.
Okay. Can you follow my lecture?
Yes. Unfortunately, I have started a little bit late with the lecture because. Yeah.
Okay.
And I need time actually. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the message here is Zakat is one of the government revenue. It's called as one. And then how are you going to spend this? So this is very related to the working of fiscal policy. Okay. So now is a question. It's a session for question and answer. Do you have any question?
Yes. I have got it.
Any question from the participant?
Excuse me, Professor.
Yes.
As we can see here, there are already plenty of questions in the chat room. Can I read some for you?
Oh, where is the chat room? I cannot see the chat room. Wait. Where is the chat room? Oh, okay. Okay. What is the question?
You can choose, or I will choose.
I want to ask you. I hear from my friend that in Malaysia, Zakat institutions do not face difficulty in collect the Zakat fund, but their problem is reading. Is it true? Or if yes, give a tip. In Indonesia, we have opposite problem than what Indonesia is Zakat should have. Oh, okay. So actually, this is the problem. Maybe the problem that we are facing maybe 5 or 10 years. 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where we have the problem. The problem is for me is because of we don't have a good system. Our delivery system is not good as what we have currently. What we have, okay. Yes, we can collect because why? Because people now start. I mean, from the last 20 years until now, they start paying zakat. And then they start realize that zakat is compulsory, then they pay the zakat. And from the figures that I have shown to you, the amount keep on increasing. It shows what? It shows that people now realize that the importance of, or the awareness, okay, they are aware now that zakat is a compulsory, is a religious duty, so they pay the zakat. Okay, but the problem is maybe 5 or 10 years ago, since that we can see that they cannot distribute it on time. Why? Because of the delivery system. So we can question that on the delivery system. They are not effective. Okay, so maybe one of the issues is we don't have the list of asnaf. Okay, the list is not there. If you have a good system to have a list of, let's say, for example, in Brunei, if you are eligible to pay zakat, you need to register. The same also can go to the recipient, where the recipient, the asnaf, they need also to register. So then what happened is they've been doing this since a few years ago, that they have a good data to improve again delivery. So so my response to that question is that happened a few years ago, not happen currently. They already improved that. Okay, any question? More question on that?
I will read for you from Sister, which one is Novilia Aisyah from Universitas Jember, Indonesia. Under the progress of Islamic economics in Malaysia, derived from top-to-down approach, is there any socialization or education program or campaign in progress?
Of course, the approach can be from the top to the bottom, meaning that the policy of the government, okay, or the campaign done by the government, or the campaign done by the Zakat authority. But at the same time, also we need to look into the possibility to get more people to pay zakat, and this can be done to the awareness program. The awareness program that have been done through many channels, through the media, social, through the newspapers, or through the campaign. Okay, so it is a continuous campaign or continuous awareness program that has been done by Zakat authority in order to encourage or to ask the people to pay zakat, because you know that zakat is one of the pillar in Islam, and then they do it from different channels. Even during the khutbah also they spread it through the khutbah. I saw the Fatimah Zarah want to ask question. Raise hand. Brother Ahmad?
Yeah.
I saw Fatimah Zarah raise her hand.
Yes.
Ask question.
The co-host can. Where's Fatimah?
Amanda Kubala. Who is Amanda Kubala? From where? Amanda Kubala.
I am from Indonesia, Prof.
Oh, you are in Indonesia. I thought your name is not from the Indonesia. You are not Indonesian. From where are you, Amanda?
South of Sumatra, Palembang.
Oh, Palembang. Okay. So your question is zakat as income tax rebate. How actually the mechanism is zakat collection? Yeah, the zakat collection is because you see that in our constitution, tax at par with the zakat, meaning that tax belong to the federal government, zakat belong to the state government. So meaning that both become the revenues of the government, only the revenues at different level of government. Okay, so of course, if you already paid the tax, or you already paid the zakat, for example, my question is, do we need to pay the zakat, the tax? If you pay the tax, meaning that it is a burdensome to us, right? Or it is a burden for us because you pay both. You pay zakat and also you pay the tax. So what actually, the practice here is I fill up my form, my income tax forms, and then at the same time already paid my zakat. Okay, so they link it together, these two systems. So I pay income tax, and then after that, tax zakat is deductible, okay, from the tax. So when let's say my tax is 1,000, okay, and then I already paid 1,000 ringgit zakat, I don't need to pay my tax. Okay, so at the end of the form, I've just filled up that my zakat, my tax can be offsetted by my zakat. Okay, so I don't need to pay my tax. So I pay already my zakat. Okay, so this is how the system works. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Yeah, come.
Next question maybe from Sister Luli from Win Sunan Kalijaga, Indonesia.
Where Mr. Rosadar or what? Win
Sunan Kalijaga, Indonesia, sir. Would you like to explain about Zakah digitalization in Malaysia for both fundraising and distributing? Indonesia is good enough in implementing digitalization of Zakah payment. People can pay Zakah by e-wallet distributing, but for distributing Zakah, I think Indonesia still need improvement.
Let's look at it from the payment system, right? This is how the payment system works, right? One is you pay your zakat. How do you pay your zakat in this digital world? How do you pay your zakat? You can pay your zakat through the deduction from your account in your bank. And then from there, you pay to a digital banking. Okay, and digital banking deduct from your account and then transfer to the Amil. Okay, transfer to the Amil, and then Amil collect that money, and then that money will be distributed to, because you are already in the digital world where have a big data, where the ASNAP, the list of ASNAP already embedded in your system, IT system, then it can be automatically be transferred to. If your name is, let's say you're one of the zakat recipient or ASNAP, you can transfer. Otherwise, you need to go to the to register. Let's say you want to pay your, for example, during the pandemic, COVID pandemic, you owe something, you cannot pay your debt. Okay, how can I pay my debt if I don't have the income? For example. So you register under the website or the system of the Zakat authority that you cannot pay your debt. Can you consider my application to pay my debt through the Asnaf Al-Gharimin? Okay, so they will process that, then they inform you whether you are successful to get the debt, or you can be considered as the Asnaf Al-Gharimin. So this is where we can look at the payment system. The digitalization of the payment system is very important for the success of the zakat management in any country. For me, because we are now living in the digital world, so we need to embark on this program to speed up the process, not only to speed up, but also to make it efficient on our delivery system. Meaning that if you can deliver, very fast, your collection and your distribution, then you have become efficient. So you can show to the world that this is the Islamic way of doing things, right? We can do it efficiently, we can do it effectively through the system under the IRR 4.0, for example. So we can improve our delivery.
Brother Handika raised his hand.
Oh, Brother Handika, yes, please.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you, Prof. So,
Yeah.
as you mentioned before that the Zakat is as one of fiscal instrument in Malaysia, I was curious about something. Is there any consequence to the people if they don't pay Zakah to the state government? And the second question is there any possibility for private sector to collect and distribute Zakah in Malaysia?
Yeah.
And my last question is, as we know, Prof. Abdul Ghafar, you have discussed with a lot of people in Indonesia from stakeholder, government, and also maybe private sector and academia. Do you have any commentaries about the Zakah collecting and distributing system in Indonesia, which is we have Zakat is not the part as the fiscal instrument, and there is also the possibility for the private sector to collect and distribute Zakah. Do you have any commentar or about this system? Thank you, Prof.
Okay. All right. So my on the fiscal instrument, as I mentioned before, that the problem here is Zakat is considered as a fiscal instrument. Okay. Again, because Zakat is one of the revenue of the state government. And then we look at how do we channel that Zakat. Zakat we channel to the poor, we channel to the needy, we channel it to the fisabilillah, gharimin, for slavery, and for those who are travelers. Okay, so meaning that this category of recipient Zakat recipient, they can categorize as under the socio-economic development. Okay, under the socio-economic development, how can we develop socially and economically our citizens? I mean, those who are entitled to get the Zakat. Okay, so the problem is currently, this is the problem. What we are facing now is the problem is the policymakers did not recognize it as tools. Or the some state they recognize it as tools. Okay, but when they prepare the budget of the state, they don't look it in totality. So they read separately. Okay, this is the Zakat fund, this is the anggaran budget daerah. So they don't merge it together to look at what is the impact if, let's say, we use these two instruments together. Okay, so from the policy perspective, I believe that it is not effective if we separate it. Okay, but in terms of operation, maybe you can separate it. But in terms of the vision and also the mission and also the goals that we want to achieve need to be synchronized or need to be coordinated, make it effective and or to make it efficient. Okay, so this is the challenge. So the challenge for me is maybe this is also related to the understanding of the policymakers. Okay, do they understand that Zakat is part of the government revenue and part of the fiscal policy? This is the problem. Maybe we need to educate, not to educate, we need to provide a training for the legislator or the PRD, okay, to understand this, I mean, the working of Zakat in our context. Okay, how much the private sector? Yes, in Malaysia, the private sectors is allowed to, not only the private sectors. What I understood from your question is the private sectors maybe you can consider as a corporate company, right? Okay, private sector.
I'm sorry, Prof. I mean private institutions such as NGO to collect and distribute Zakat.
Oh yes, yes.
Indonesia
Yeah,
Index dompet duafa rumah jagat.
Okay.
Yes, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, we have this because if you, let's say you are entitled to be the amil, you can apply it. Either you are individual, you are NGO, or you are a private sector, or you are a company. For example, I give you an example where in Malaysia, let's say you have a company. Your company is called as a company A. Okay? And then let's say you pay your zakat, 10 million zakat you pay. Okay? And then you as an amil, you collect that. I mean, from your business, you pay 10 million zakat to the amil. But you pay to the amil 10 million, and then at the same time, you are also allowed to distribute that zakat. Meaning that the amil can retain that 10, for example, 5 million, and the remaining 5 million, you can keep it, and then you can distribute yourself. Fine. The issue here is the reporting. The reporting. I mean, the trust should be there. The trust. So maybe my comment on the collection and distribution is the trust. Okay. The trust is the trust from the zakat authority to the payers and also to the recipient. Because the payers, maybe you are also become the amil. Then you need to report that this amount of money has been distributed to, let's say, that particular asna, and then this amount to that particular asna. You need to report to the authority. Because this is important for disclosure and also not disclosure, but also for reporting purposes. So at least people knows that you collect, and then you know where it goes, that money, that zakat. Okay. So my engagement with the many stakeholders in Indonesia about the collection and distribution, I think because you have a different authority, right? We have BAZNAS, we have LZS, and not only the LZS, you have the private NGO. Okay, even the bank also you can collect zakat. Okay, as long as you have rules, for me is this is the issues of trust, because you are actually you have been given amanah, the responsibility to collect, not only to collect but also to distribute. One is you need to have a good system. Okay, system meaning that a system of the procedures, standard operating procedures need to be there. Okay, because we need to create an environment where the people trust you. You are amil. You collect this much and then this much you distribute. Okay, so we need to create a trust there. So for me is either you are a private or you are individual, you are NGO, but we need to have a good system, the system where we can trust them, the system. And how can you do that? The trust can produce a trusted institution is you need to have a good reporting. For me, a good reporting is very important, because currently we look at, I know that my friend, a lot of my friends working with BAZNAS at the central level, at the headquarters in Jakarta. Okay, many of them are my friend, Dr. Zainul Bahad, and also Prof. Sujijau, and also the others. So they are now working very hard on to come up with the system of collection and also distribution, where people can trust you as the amil, BAZNAS as amil, as ZAK as amil, or other individual or other organization amil. So from there, you can collect more and then you can distribute more, and then we can benefit the people. This is Rezeda. Ahmad, brother Ahmad.
Yes, sir.
Is there any enforcement method if someone does not pay zakat in Malaysia and state where it is made mandatory? Of course. What they call it? No, we have the rules where if you don't fast during the Ramadan, if let's say you are not fasting during Ramadan, they can send you to the jail. Okay? In Malaysia, we can send you to the jail if you are not fasting in the month of Ramadan. But in the case of zakat, we don't have that. Let's say you don't pay zakat, we don't send you to the jail. Okay? Currently, the law doesn't provide any provision that can ask the people who don't pay zakat to have to be penalized. Okay? If you look at the enforcement, we don't have the enforcement. This is Resida Kavasova. What are the incentives for private zakat collector? Oh, incentive is you collect the zakat. Let's say you collect, just now I give you the example. You collect the zakat, let's say 1 million. Okay? And then in your institution, let's say in your institution, like in Malaysia, where the university can collect the zakat. The university can collect zakat, but in the university, you also have the fakir and also the miskin, where the student, they are fakir, the student also they are miskin. So, and also you are the amil. So meaning that when you collect, let's say 1 million, maybe 3 out of 8 portion goes to you. So meaning that you can distribute yourself that zakat. So the incentive for you is you can distribute it to your community. Meaning that if let's say you are in the university, you can give it to the student who are poor or who are needy. And the same goes to also to the company. Let's say the company pay you zakat 1 million and then you pay to the zakat 1 million and then the zakat authority will give you, let's say 50% of that 1,500,000, for example. So you can distribute that 500,000 yourself. So this is the incentive for you. Because sometimes the private sectors, they need to show, right? They need to show your corporate social responsibility. So they can do that through the zakat distribution. So seems that this money is come from you. Actually, this money belongs to the zakat authority, but you use that for your CSR. I saw Rosada raise hand. Who is Rosada?
Thank you, Professor. So it means that private collectors are from a certain community and they should care about their own community. So
yeah. So they can collect your money and then they can serve to your community. So you collect your zakat from your community and then you can give it to your own community.
Oh, thank you. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Professor. There is a response from the answer of the first question that I almost missed from Brother Amirullah from Brawijaya University. He said, so in your opinion, how many years Indonesia would attain the optimal zakah collection?
This is a difficult answer for me to answer that question. The optimal, okay? I don't know when will be the optimal, okay? Because we need to work hard and then not only to work hard, but also we need to have a good rules and also we need to have good enforcement in order to, for me, I don't think that we can reach the optimal level, but what we can do is to make people understand about the obligation to pay zakat. By doing that, we can encourage more people to pay zakat. Not only zakat, it's very general. Okay, you may encourage people to pay different zakat. Okay, because we have a different zakat. We had zakat on gold, we had zakat on silver, we have zakat on livestock, agriculture product, and income share, for example, and maybe trust fund, you have trust fund, or you have saving. So all these are need to be understood by the people out there, and then from there, our role is we facilitate. We facilitate for those who want to pay the zakat to fulfill their obligation. For me, it's more important than having at the optimal level. But the challenge for me is in Malaysia is to make the legislator understood the importance of zakat as one of the revenues that can be used to for the development of the ummah. Okay, that is more important, and that is a difficult part for us to convince the policymakers. Okay, because their policymakers are very much clouded by their conventional policy that normally what they have already learned in different capacities. Okay? I think it's good to have this course because we prepare a new generation that can understand the Islamic economics. Okay, and not only to understand Islamic economy, but also understand the role of zakat in the Islamic economics. If you want to learn, then you can email me. I'm sure that I will give you my email after this. Maybe you can share my email to others. Okay. So this is my email. So you can email me after this if you want.
All right, Professor.
Yeah. Or you can WhatsApp me this number. Okay. So if anyone want to, so you can email me. This is my Gmail and also my numbers. You can contact me.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for your all answer of the questions. I think we are enough for this Q&A session. Your answer were very insightful, and I think that is all for the Q&A session. Professor Abdul Ghafar, unfortunately, our time is very limited to have all questions answered. Maybe there are more questions, but our time is limited. And please stay on your screen for a second because we want to show you a small token of our appreciation today. Please accept it with our sincere thanks. For operator.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
welcome.
for the certificate. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome, Professor.
Yeah.
Before we close our agenda today, is there anything else you would like to say, Professor? How about the assignment or the quiz, or maybe a closing statement?
Pardon?
Is there anything else you would like to say?
No.
How about
That's enough. That's it. Yeah. If you want to learn, maybe you can learn. You can search. If you want to know more about me, you can search my name in Google. Just Google my name. Okay, and then if you want thing, you can email me, or maybe you can you can email me, or you can WhatsApp me. Rosada,
thank you
maybe
very much.
Rosada, maybe one day I can visit you in Russia.
Okay, thank you very much,
Inshallah,
Professor.
Doctor.
Inshallah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Professor Abdul Ghafar. It's a pleasure to having you between us. Ladies and gentlemen, brother and sister, Alhamdulillah, our agenda today has come to an end. We would like to express our gratitude to all our distinguished lecturers today, Madam Yasmina Francke and Professor Abdul Ghafar Ismail, who have shared their valuable time, knowledge, and wisdom on today's lecture. We would also like to express our gratitude to all our participants who have attended all the lecture today until the end. May Allah bless us all. Also, we would like to ask your forgiveness, as you may find many inconveniences from us and especially from me as a master of ceremony. Before we close this session, I would like to tell all of participants that this session concludes all of our agenda for this week. Inshallah, we will meet again next week on Monday, September 21st, 2020, at the same time as today. 4 o'clock in the evening or 4 p.m. Western Indonesian time. On Monday, we will have a session on the innovation of Awqaf and its potential by Professor Aditya Sukmana, and a session on the role of Awqaf in achieving SDGs by Dr. Henry Tanjung. We would also like to remind all of participation about the assignments, pre-test and post-test. Please kindly check your account at the website ocw.ipb.ac.id using your username and password. This is the end of our agenda today. Let's close by saying hamdalah and dua kifaratul majlis. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika. Asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi. Thank you very much. Brother Ahmad.
Jazakallah khair.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof.
Welcome, Andika. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Salam, Professor. Thank you and enjoy your weekend all.